Alright, man, peace. So for you brothers who've been following my channel, you'll know that very recently I've made a series of videos pertaining to many of the trials, tribulations, and travails that have befallen the Washington Wizards, particularly their formerly star point guard John Wall. And to me, it's not much of a surprise, because for anyone who's been following the NBA recently, you know that John Wall is not particularly a favorite of many of his teammates. And beyond that, I've always likened John Wall onto an Eastern Conference version of Russell Westbrook, a diminished Eastern Conference version of Russell Westbrook. In other words, what? Russell Westbrook is probably, when fully healthy, the #1 athlete in the NBA. John Wall, when fully healthy and not 15 pounds overweight like he appears to be now, he'd probably be on the top 5 list of all-around natural athletes in the NBA. But what they also both have in common is that they have terrible jump shots, they make very bad decisions, and they're not good in the clutch. And eventually, when you're the point guard and you have the basketball in your hands as much as both of those players do, and you always make bad decisions, sooner or later your teammates are going to turn on you unless you're extremely likable in the locker room. And it seems as though Russell Westbrook must be very likable in the locker room because they have not turned on him yet. John Wall must not be particularly likable in the locker room. So anyway, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Let's talk.
Some people have to actually work for a living.
Don't call it a comeback, but really it was. The Wizards, in all their drama, were trailing by as many as 24 points against the Clippers, but they still pulled off the victory, 125-118. Wall, Markieff, what's the deal?
I try to stay focused, focus on getting ready to have my new son.
Now look at his field goal percentage, 9 of 24. Whenever your point guard is shooting 9 of 24, what does that mean? That means that he's abusing the power and the responsibility that he has as the primary ball handler. That's really all that means. Because when you're bringing the basketball up and you have the ability to make decisions for not just yourself, but all of your teammates, and you decide to take 24 shots, that's you taking advantage of the fact that the offense of your team entails that you have the ball in your hands for the majority of the time. This is also a situation that's going on in Boston right now with Kyrie. Kyrie, with all that power as the primary ball handler, he's struggling with understanding how to make his teammates better while also feeding into his own DNA to be the assassin. Damian Lillard also struggles with this at times in Portland.
So trying to turn his organization around, his franchise around, and win some games. All they do is just go out there and compete, dog. You know what I mean? All of us go out there and compete. That's one thing I always did since day one, is give everything I got. And to hear those type of things, it's kind of funny. It's frustrating at the same time. But I've been through worse things, worse than that. So I just stand over top of all that.
All that's cool, John Wall, but let me say this, brother. You better have a squeaky clean off the court image. You better have a squeaky clean off the court life that you're living. Because for you to stand there and say that you don't understand why people are coming at you like this and that, if you have any dirt in your closet, you have any skeletons in your closet, they are going to dig them out.
After the last 48 hours or whatever it's been, with the distractions and whatever it's been, does that make this one a little bit nicer with the way you got it?
Yeah, not really. This stuff is going on, so I wouldn't say it makes it nicer. We just need to figure it out.
What do you mean?
The comments that's coming from the locker room, that don't happen in no sports at all.
Yo, this dude Markieff Morris is looking around like, if I ever find out who the nigga is that's talking this shit about me, spill me on and popping.
So that's messed up.
Do you address that?
I don't know who it is, so it's hard to address. But it's messed up.
But it's messed up. But it's messed up. And if I find out who it is, right now, I have a private investigator on the case. And if I find out who it is, the shit is messed up and I'm going to mess somebody up. Believe that.
Despite the dub, it is messy in our nation's capital. Steve Knight, spill the tea for us.
Here's the deal. First of all, Keith Morris, who I like a lot, is absolutely right.
Well, Stephen A. Smith, it's not that you necessarily like Markieff Morris that much. It's just that at one point he was willing to whoop your ass. He was ready to whoop your ass. If I remember correctly, you were at a game in D.C. in the aftermath of saying something relatively incendiary about him, and he walked right by you and bumped you. I remember seeing the footage of that, and you turned around and you looked kind of shocked.
It's messed up what's happening. it's messed up what we're seeing on the floor from the Washington Wizards. Prior to last night, when they came back from a 24-point deficit against the Clippers, by the way, I mean, they had lost 2 straight, lost to the Brooklyn Nets, and then I told folks in D.C. Lillard was coming to town to drop 40, and that's exactly what he did to the number.
Well, that's what Damian Lillard can do to anybody. He's one of the great streak shooters in the history of the NBA. Like, that dude literally could score 45 points on any defender, probably whoever participated in the NBA. And then the next night come back and shoot 3 for 28.
40, and then last night they show up and they're down 24 points, looking lackadaisical, lethargic, just completely apathetic and disinterested. He's right from the standpoint that it's messed up what's happening, okay? But he's inaccurate. It's not just one person. It's numerous people, Keith. And it's not just the players. It's a lot of people. Because what they've been witnessing from the Washington Wizards is unacceptable performances that have spanned years. Now, John Wall. Let me say this about John Wall. John Wall is not a bad guy. John Wall is an all...
Now, when you have to hear something like that as a viewing audience, and you have to state something like that as a television pundit, what that really means is that John Wall is somebody who gets himself involved in a lot of fuckery, but you don't think that he means any ill intent. But you're hearing his name pop up in numerous storylines all across the NBA that the masses at large are not privy to. Stephen A. Smith knows a lot of shit, but he's pretty much trying to vouch for John Wall as a person, but he's hearing his name come up over and over and over again, and this is his way of trying to warn John Wall to get his shit together.
All-star, a 5-time all-star. This guy could ball. Max Kellerman, you and I have sat on this very show talking about how John Wall deserves his money.
And just the fact that the Washington Wizards are ready to acknowledge that they're open to trading John Wall and Bradley Beal, that's their way of letting everyone in the NBA know, look, we're going to rebuild. We might take our time and see if our team can get a little win streak going, just so that we can build up the equity, build up the stock in both of these players to trade them anyway. But both of these guys are going to get moved.
Before he signed that $169 million, $170 million extension. So why do we say that? Because John Wall can play. What John Wall needs to understand is that nobody is saying you can't play. We're saying you haven't done what a franchise player is supposed to do.
You know why that is, Stephen A. Smith? Because he's not a franchise player, brother. And that's the main problem. So many of these television, NBA experts, and even NFL experts going into other sports, they try to put these titles of exaltation onto these athletes that don't deserve it. There are only about 4 or 5 franchise players in the NBA. You know what? Maybe I'll say 6 or 7, if I really had a chance to think about it, that you would want to build your franchise around. Of course, LeBron, KD, Steph, probably Kawhi, Anthony Davis, James Harden. I'm not even quite sure if I would put Westbrook in there. I would say Antetokounmpo. Those would be the definitive 7. And then, of course, you'd have to think about other guys like Kyrie and Damian Lillard, so on and so forth. But those would be the definitive 7. Westbrook, you know. Those are the guys on the outside looking in regards to being considered franchise players in my view. But the first 7 guys that I named, definitely LeBron, KD, Steph, Kawhi, Anthony Davis, Harden, and Antetokounmpo.
That's galvanized the troops.
John Wall is nowhere near being a franchise player.
Bring folks together and lead this franchise. It ain't just about you going out there and averaging your money. You've got people in D.C. And remember what I said, Max, because obviously I went to D.C. to talk to John Wall and he didn't want to have that conversation. I don't blame him. I wouldn't want to have...
I'm sure he didn't want to have that conversation with you, Stephen A. Smith, because of some of the things that you put out there on television. Some of the innuendo that you were postulating that someone like myself picked up on. It was very clear because I had been asserting that even before you made that little report or that little allegation or, you know, trying to imply certain things. It's very clear to me when I saw that photo of him right before the that little Olympic scrimmage that they had out there in Vegas last summer, that this dude is messing with something a little bit stronger than alcohol. I'm going to leave it at that. I hope that I'm wrong about that, but just looking at him, that's what I see. And for Stephen A. Smith to put out some of that information last week, it confirmed it for me.
Had that conversation with me either in the situation that he was in. Let's be clear about what I was going to say. I don't have any personal animus against John Wall. What do I care? I sleep well at night. I didn't sleep well last night, but I sleep well at night.
When you decide to go to sleep.
There we go. I'm perfectly fine. I've got nothing against John Wall. What I went to tell him was that there's a lot of people who do, and you have to pay attention to that.
Absolutely. That's why I stated the reason why Stephen A. Smith said John Wall is not a bad guy is because he believes that John Wall is an upstanding person based on the experiences that he's had interacting with him one-on-one. But he's hearing John Wall's name pop up in too many different situations where John Wall is not showing up in a good light.
Why? Because I'm walking in the Verizon Center in the nation's capital. That arena was half full. Ain't nobody walking through the turnstiles to see John Wall.
Hell no.
They're looking at the Wizards, who have been a model.
No disrespect to John Wall, but I would not even want to watch one of his games on TV. His style of play does nothing for me. I mean, don't get it twisted. He's a cat who, if you allow him to penetrate to the basket, he can dunk on somebody. He can make an exciting play. But I'm just not somebody who appreciates his style. He has no jump shot. When you have no jump shot, that means that you have no nuance to your game. There are no wrinkles to your game. In order for you to be a great offensive player, you have to be able to, at the very least, have a consistent mid-range jumper. He has none.
Model of mediocrity, or a tad bit better, because as far as I'm concerned, when you're 500 or a little above, but you're going home in the second round and nobody's thinking about you going any further, that's what you are. And then we've got to go back to a couple of years ago. This is what I need people to understand. This latest stuff about John Wall, guys disgusted with him, feeling he don't want to share the ball enough. He's about his numbers. He's about potentially challenging for league MVP honors as opposed to prioritizing winning.
Well, Stephen A. Smith, just for you to make that statement, and I'm assuming that it's based off of some inside information that you were able to glean from others, that should show you that that's confirmation that John Wall must be on some heavy narcotic. For him to believe that he has an opportunity to win the NBA Most Valuable Player award, he's nowhere near that level. So if his teammates feel that way about him, that would explain some of the antagonistic energy that they have for him in regards to why are you playing in such a way to try to compile stats. It's very clear that you're going for an MVP award, and most likely he was bragging to them either in the locker room or in practice that this is going to be his year, he's going to go for the MVP, things like that. That delusional players say when their mind is not where it should be in regards to the team's success.
This is the kind of things they're saying about him. I need everybody to understand. This goes back about 3 years. 3 years ago, not the last two Scott Brooks coaches. Talk about Randy Wittman. Randy Wittman, the year 2015-2016, he's coaching the Washington Wizards. What happens? Randy Wittman is in practice, according to numerous sources that I've spoken to. He's in practice. He goes off with John. He goes off because he's getting on everybody like he always did. John Wall cusses at him, what have you. Randy Wittman cancels practice. He goes upstairs. He wants Ernie Grunfeld to find him. What does Ernie Grunfeld do? Nothing. John Wall knows about this. John Wall doesn't show up really to play for the rest of the season. I mean, he's not himself, okay? Because he's like, I'm the man. What happens with that? And he ends up getting hurt in the playoffs. They get bounced out of there. Randy Wittman doesn't get back. This year, what happens? It's stuff coming out about him with Scott Brooks. He did pretty much the same thing, except this time, he was allowed to find John Wall. John Wall can play.
But Stephen A. Smith, here's the problem. And none of these stories that Stephen A. Smith is regurgitating or reciting, none of these things surprise me because that goes on all over in the professional sports world, in baseball, football, basketball, where the head coach will clash with the star player. All that's fine. The issue with John Wall is that he's not good enough to be making those declarations in practice, that he's the man and he does not have to listen to the coach. You're not good enough to do that. For you to do something like that, you have to be a LeBron James, a KD, a Steph Curry, a Kawhi Leonard, a Giannis Antetokounmpo. And for the most part, those guys are not going to do that to their head coach. It's normally insecure, fringe stars like John Wall who want to be overly confrontational with their head coach because they're upset that other people do not view them how they view themselves. Nobody's going to tell John Wall that he's in a class with Steph Curry or even Russell Westbrook. Nobody's going to tell him that because it's not the truth. So that's why he has to run around talking about, I'm the man, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do what I want, and it's never going to work out. And then beyond that, in this current NBA style of basketball, he just does not fit in. John Wall would have been great 20, 25 years ago. A slashing point guard with athleticism who could finish at the rim. He would have been great back then. Because having a jump shot back then was not as important as it is today.
But John Wall has to leave. And the bottom line is he has not been doing that. The Wizards have fragmented because of it. They showed out last night. He showed out last night and deserves credit for that. But what he needs to understand is that last night is supposed to be indicative of what you're supposed to be doing all the time. Not just when the heat comes your way because negative publicity is coming your way.
First, real quick about John Wall. He used to be the best player in the East who wasn't on the Cleveland Cavaliers. The only players better than him in the East, really, were LeBron James and Kyrie Irving. Both.
I'm not quite sure about that one, Max Kellerman. We'd have to go back and really think about that, but I'm not sure if I can certifiably say that John Wall used to be the third best player in the Eastern Conference. I would probably take DeMar DeRozan over him back when DeMar was with the Toronto Raptors. I think I would take DeMar DeRozan over him.
Both better than him. Kyrie by a little bit. John Wall is a brilliant passer. Was like the fastest guy in the league. And by the way, his three-point shots come along in the last couple of seasons.
No, sir, not quite. I mean, if we really want to go there, I would take Victor Oladipo from last season above John Wall. As a matter of fact, I think that Victor Oladipo had a better year last year than any year that John Wall has ever had.
That's not the case anymore. I can think of a whole bunch of guys better than John Wall in the East right now. Maybe better than John Wall ever was. The Greek Freak, Kawhi, Kyrie, who's no longer on the Cavs. I think a healthy Porzingis is more valuable than John Wall.
This dude is always talking about Porzingis. Porzingis made me sell his stock when 20 games into the Knicks season last year, the man said that he was tired. I was done with him after that. There's no way in the world that you're supposed to be the leader of your team and you could look into the camera and claim that you're tired because you were expected to be the lead guy. That means that you cannot handle the load mentally or physically.
Embiid, you could argue Simmons.
Argue Simmons? Who the hell would take John Wall over Ben Simmons? That's not an argument.
Used to be when they would link up with Toronto, you'd say, why do you believe the Wizards will win this series? Because Kyle Lowry or John Wall. The best player on the floor is John Wall.
Right, but the Wizards lost to Toronto last year. What are you talking about, man? What the hell are you talking about? I don't even like Kyle Lowry. And I would have to think about Kyle Lowry or John Wall. I would probably take Kyle Lowry because his jump shot is better.
That's not the case anymore. But I want to talk about Ernie Grunfeld, Stephen A. Because I keep saying, a year too early instead of a year too late. Trade him a year too early instead of a year too late. He waited a year too long. I love how they're putting it out there. We'll listen to anyone. We're open to the entire roster. We're willing to listen. Yeah, no kidding you're willing to listen. You think anyone's going to want to trade for John Wall in that contract right now? You waited too long. So I'm thinking, why? Why, Ernie Grunfeld?
Yeah, that John Wall contract is crazy. Wow.
Grunfeld? Because once upon a time for the Knicks, Stephen A., he's the dude who pulled the trigger on a very unpopular trade at the time, trading Charles Oakley for Marcus Camby. Traded John Starks for Latrell Sprewell. Why didn't he trade these guys? By the way, he's the guy who drafted JaVale McGee and Nick Young. Like, he looks for talent. If there's a guy with an attitude...
Right, but is that something that you want on your ledger? I drafted Nick Young and JaVale McGee. That's something to brag about?
He looks for talent. Well, he's undervalued because of his attitude. Grunfeld's like, no. He's young, athletic. He's talented. I want him. Why did he stick with these guys? He believed in their talent. He drafted Otto Porter way too high. He paid him way too much.
Well, you also have to remember, at least if I remember correctly, Otto Porter is a Georgetown product, so that's right in the neighborhood. I can't get too upset with Ernie because at the end of the day, I mean, how old is John Wall right now? Maybe 26, 27. Bradley Beal's about, 24, 25? And they've been together now for, maybe 5 years? He was probably hoping that they could mature into something dynamic in regards to being a backcourt in the Eastern Conference. And it never materialized.
He overpaid for Wall, and it turns out he may have overpaid for Beal, although it's not a terrible contract. And what I'm saying is, this is the reason he waited too long is he believes in these guys. And to your point, the problem with this group wasn't only that the talent wasn't big enough, it wasn't good enough, it's they didn't get along from jump. This has been a problem in terms of chemistry now for 2 or 3 years.
You're absolutely right about the talent, which means that we have to look at my buddy who I've known for over 20 years, Ernie Grunfeld. The fact of the matter is that one could argue you shouldn't have got rid of Randy Wittman. Number two.
Right, but Stephen A. Smith, come on. The problem right now, I can't even call the problem the coach, because Scott Brooks is not a championship coach either. The problem is that their team as currently constructed is not built to win in the NBA of 2018-2019. They don't have the shooting. And then when you have a team like that with bad chemistry, they're not going to play good defense because they're not going to look out for one another. So that's the bottom line to that. And it's very, very difficult to build a championship team, especially when you don't know how to create that culture. See, down in Miami, you're never going to hear about issues between teammates in Miami because they understand how to create a culture. Now, they get upset with that center. They get upset with his ass because he complains a lot about wanting to get more playing time, even though they want him to become more of a stretch five. And because he does not have real shooting ability, that marginalizes their ability to play him on the floor against certain lineups. So for the most part, that's what you hear out of Miami are the issues with their center. But you're not going to hear about too many problems with players coming into camp out of shape and going back and forth with one another. Riley's not going to tolerate that. So they have a championship culture in Miami. That's why, every 5 or 6 years or so, they're going to be major contenders to win a championship, or at least to compete for a championship in Miami. You're not going to hear about that in D.C. because Grunfeld does not know how to build a winner. He might be a good raw talent evaluator, but in regards to understanding how pieces are going to fit together, he's not that guy. He doesn't know how to do that.
You overpay. You gave Henry more money as a backup than you gave Gortat, which served to alienate it. When John Wall MF'd Gortat last year, and Gortat basically said, "To hell with it, I want out of here."
Well, John Wall felt betrayed because his attitude with Gortat was, you can't do anything. The only thing that you can do is dunk the basketball, and I'm the one setting you up for all the alley-oops. And you have the nerve to be the guy running your mouth the most when I'm hurt, when I'm injured, and I'm out?
Last November, that was a problem that was never resolved. Now you got a situation with Scott Brooks. You locked him in $7 million per year for 5 years, every penny guaranteed. So we can look at Ernie Gortat.
That was an asinine hire. I have no idea why they hired Scott Brooks for.
Ernie Grunfeld with stuff like that. But in the end, to your point, when you talk about how the team didn't get along or whatever, that's John Wall. When you're the franchise, you got to bring people together. You got to bring people together. If you're the GM, you can't pay the guy who hasn't brought them together in 3 or 4 years. Okay. Well, I'm not going to say John Wall didn't deserve to get paid. I'm going to say to you, I get your point. He just has to step up.
Well, come on, Stephen A. Smith. You're not going to say that John Wall does not deserve to get paid, but you're going to agree with Max Kellerman that his contract is too prohibitive for any team to want him. Now, what really are you saying? Nobody's going to say that Steph Curry's contract or Kevin Durant's contract or LeBron James's contract is too prohibitive if they will offer in a trade. But if John Wall's contract is too prohibitive, what you're saying is that he does not deserve that money.
Conversation.
They're 6-11. He's a franchise player, Molly.
I'm with you.
For a team that's 6-11.
I get it.
6-11, John Wall.
I hear you. When we come back.
Well, here's the problem, Stephen A. Smith. You're trying to give him that attribute or that title of being a franchise player, and then you're saying that he's 6-11. So that must mean what? He's not a franchise player, brother. It is what it is. We'll see how things turn out for Mr. John Wall and Mr. Bradley Beal. Peace.